Hello, welcome back to the Jazz Ranch. I'm glad you joined me. I have a little bit of laryngitis. It's probably from calling the cats up on the mountain. But anyway, I'm going to do something special for you tonight. But you know, I was just thinking recently I played a concert here in the big room, over in the big room in the ranch here. Had a very nice audience, and in the middle of the concert, all of a sudden somebody's cell phone rang from the audience, and I'm thinking, oh boy, this is a tense moment. The person's embarrassed. What am I going to do? Well, what would Victor Borga have done? So what I did was I yelled out to them and I said, if that's my agent calling, tell him I'm working. So that got a little bit of a chuckle and lightened everything up, and we could continue. So now tonight I want to talk about diminished chord runs, how to use them in a song, and also the altered dominant, how to use them improvising. So here now we go with altered dominant and diminished chord runs and how to apply them in your improvisation. I want to start out by saying this is step one, and I'm calling it diminished scale runs. So I'm just going to be playing the diminished scale in runs, and then I'm going to create patterns based on that. Now you know that it's a symmetrical scale, just as the chromatic scale is symmetrical with all half steps, and the whole tone scale is symmetrical with all whole steps. This is a symmetrical scale which alternates between half steps and whole steps, depending where you're starting or whether you want a diminished scale or you want an altered dominant. For me, I call the half step, whole step one altered dominant because it works with the dominant seventh chord, and I call the whole step, half step a diminished scale because it works with the diminished chord specifically. So now there's four families. There's actually three families and four chords within each family. So there's a C family, there's an F family, and then a G family. I reduced it to three families based on the three easiest scales, C, F, and G. But within those, the other elements within it, or the other chords that are within those families, are based on a pattern of a diminished chord. So C7, E flat 7, G flat 7, A7 all have the same scale. C sharp diminished, E diminished, G diminished, and B flat diminished all have the same scale. So all those 8 chords can be played over the same scale. It's going to sound very sophisticated. So I go to E flat now, go to G flat, A. They're all altered scales, of course, and altered chords. Or they have flat 9s or sharp 9s in them, or sharp 11s, that kind of thing. 13s and flat 7s. Now, if this is new to you, you should go to my previous video on this where I go into great detail. But now I'm just going to show you some of the patterns that you can play based on this diminished scale or this altered dominant scale, however you like to look at it. Some people like to look at it as being two diminished chords stacked like that, and that's what creates the scale. Other people like to look at it as a melodic minor with the root raised a half step. I like to look at it as either half step, whole step, or whole step half. That's just the way I can see it and the way I conceive of it, and I can see that pattern there, and I begin to learn that pattern on how to use it in an interesting way. So now here's some of the patterns. I'll play a few of these. I've got 13 of them. I'm not going to play all those. It'll be boring, but I'll play a few interesting ones like this. Whoops. Like that. And then this one. See that? Now these are all on the sheet, so you can study the sheet and really learn these. You can't follow this too easily looking at this, but this is to complement the sheet music, which you'll get on my website. How about this one now? That's a popular one. And there's another one. And here we go. How about, that's pretty interesting. Now here we go. And then we have, this is one I like. imagine a movie score, that one. I resolved at that time. So that's a few of them, and now I'm going to move on to the next step so you can see how to apply them to a 2/5 progression. In other words, the practical application of these runs. Okay, this is step 2. Now I realize that learning that scale and just being able to play it in all those patterns is a drill. It's a means to an end, but we eventually want to apply it somehow. So the first application I'm going to make is resolving it to its 1. In other words, it's a 5 chord resolving to 1. Or a diminished chord resolving up a half step, or however you want to do it. But it has to have a resolution, because that's more practical than just a bunch of notes. You know, in other words, we're going somewhere with it. We're going to the 5-1, which is the most important relationship in music. You can't call it a progression, but the 5 to the 1 is all over the place in every kind of music we play. But so that scale now, we make the C7 dominant, and we're going to play the altered dominant scale, which is also the diminished scale. Resolve it to F like that. You can that's ascending, descending. So you can hear now that's more practical. Here's another one. So if I put it in a progression, so now it makes more musical sense, right? But it's very interesting sounding. So like, you know, It just begins to expand your vocabulary. And what I like to think is playing in the nooks and crannies. Now here's another one. That was a 2-measure, actually 3-measure pattern. Here's another one. Or maybe. Or maybe. Or maybe. Okay, that would work. Now how about this? How about? Or maybe. You know, like practice some different ways until you get it into your head. There's a 2-measure one. So I have these all laid out for you that you can practice in a variety of ways, just straight or within a tempo or with a swing feel, whatever. But you're beginning to get that scale into your head because it's so important. It's such an important scale to being a good jazz improviser. Okay, now we're going to move on to step 3, in which I'm going to put it now into a 2-5-1 progression. Here we go. I want to point out here that you want to be sure you realize that I'm just doing this based on the one family, the C family. If I did the F family, it would, C family is this. The F family would be this. And then the G family would be. So there's 3, you know, there's like, what, 8 for each and 3 families. That's 24 different chords that can be played over these 3 scales. You know, 8 for each, 8 chords for each scale. The 4 dominants built on a diminished chord and the 4 diminished chords built on a diminished chord. So if you're totally confused by that, write to me and I'll do something a little slower. But I want to move on now to step 3, the diminished runs on the 2-5-1. Now the 2-5-1 progression is used all the time in jazz, as is the 5-1. So now it's a little more sophisticated with the 2-5. So I use it there now. See what I did there, and then you can read this off the sheet. They're at the descending line. You know, ascending here, then attaching. You know, has that approach tone, target tone. target tone. Resolving there now. Here's another one. That's an interesting one. So these are great licks to learn. Here's another one. Here's another one. See, so all of these you can transpose to the other keys. Here we go now. Okay, now I'm going to change it up a little bit here. Instead of just going 2, 5, 1 now, I'm going to go 2, 5, 6. All right, and then, sorry, 2, 5, 3, and then 6. So it's cycling around. It's going around the cycle of fifths, and that's also very common in jazz. Almost sounds like a tune now, or an improvisation section of a tune. So there you have it. Now here's another one, a little more complicated, but it'll be on the sheet so you can learn it. Like that. Okay, so that takes care of making it more sophisticated by putting it on a chord progression that is very common in jazz, the 1-6, I'm sorry, the 2-5-1-6 or the 2-5-3-6 with the dominant chord. So now you have two dominant chords in there. Here's the C7, then the 3 chord, which is A minor 7, and then the D7, which is now altered, and also another dominant chord. Like that. Okay, so in this last segment, I'm just going to show you how I incorporate those diminished runs, or the diminished scale, or the altered dominant scale, however you want to look at it, within a tune like Misty. I'm going to play the tune a little bit so you get an idea of the melody. Okay, now we'll branch off from there. There's that scale. Here's that scale again. There it is again. There it is again. There it is again. I'm going to put a little tempo to it. So now here it is. What is that? Well, that's the scale. It's right in there. You see, it just opens up everything. A whole new world of music. There's again. There's again. There's again. See, now, you don't want to use it so much that it begins to sound like you're playing mechanically. You have to play from your imagination, your soul, and your ears, and so on. But what this will do is it will expand your ears and expand your vocabulary. This scale alone, if you practice this diligently and go through all these exercises, I'm certain you'll begin to notice a difference in your improvisation, and that makes it a lot more fun. And that's what I'm trying to do for you, make it more fun. Okay, we'll wrap up now. Wrapping up now, I'd like to say thanks so much for joining me here at the Jazz Ranch. We had a good time. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was a little technical in terms of the drills, and maybe you don't like drills, but if you do like them and you benefited from this, please write to me. I'd really love to hear from you, and I always respond to all my comments. And the scores and all the notes are on my website, so please download the free downloads. And if you're the kind of person that likes to look at the before and after, I straightened up the books in the back there, so they're a little straighter now. Anyway, we'll see you next time, and I will say in the words of my famous friend Hermie Dressel, swing loose, brother. Be cool. We'll see you next time.